still loves you to this day.
Is she still in town?
Yeah, she's down in Daytona. I'm going to see her Friday.
So that's your grandmother?
Mm-hmm. And John Paul was the only grandfather I knew. So.
Well, what a good one.
On that side, yeah. And, you know, as sad as it gets, I went every cancer treatment with him to the end. But yeah, John Paul was always the grandfather I knew.
Wonder if he could have caught that ahead of time. You know, he never was one for the doctor, but
No.
but I don't know if it would have mattered.
And even afterwards, the symptoms, he should have seen it coming. And he didn't, and that's the sad part. And he kept it secret from all of us. And, you know, that, hindsight 2020. If we all could have had it. But.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember him having many symptoms. But he wouldn't have said anyway, would he?
No. If something was wrong with John, you would have never known, and all you would have got was his beautiful smile.
You know, I met him when I was 14.
Really?
Yep, and then I met him again, or I saw him again when I was about 18. And
at that point, he was running the grocery store?
No, I met him when he had just started selling real estate, and he had split up with Renter Real Estate.
Oh, from Paul?
It used to be, no, it was Bruce Renter.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
that
right.
was way back in the...
It was 70s then, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was been a long time ago. So let me ask you this. Are you going to go back to school?
Yes, that's the plan. I graduated, as you know, from Macaulay, and then I went off to Rhodes College. And I'm currently actually applied to go to Lee University. I'm waiting to hear back from them for my Master's of Business. And the goal is get the Master's of Business. I hope to be the first person to do it in 1 year from Lee. And then go off to law school.
Is that the plan?
That
Why
is.
not just go to law school right now?
That's a great question, and it's, put it simply, is I don't feel I'm ready. And I feel like I want to make myself more diversified because, you know, I sit and watch so many smart people use law school as a backup plan, and I don't want to use that. That is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a lawyer. And what I want to have is a fallback plan. What happens if I don't ever get into law school? And in that vein, I want to have a Master's of Business. And my undergrad has set me up to, if I want to be a CPA, I can pursue that too. I can be an MBA CPA. Hopefully by the end of it, I have a JD MBA CPA. But we'll see where that takes me.
So you're sort of, instead of thinking of plan B, you're securing plan B before you go to plan A.
That's right.
It's kind of,
Yeah,
am I thinking of it right?
You are. I want to have a guarantee before I can pursue my dream. I want a guarantee. And that, I've always been a very safe type guy. I always like my guarantees before I chase down my dream. That way, if anything goes wrong, I at least know where the floor is going to be when I hit it. Does that make sense?
It makes too much sense. That's genius, really.
I don't know if I can
What
go
made
that
you
far.
think of that?
Well, it actually, my mom, Cindy Richardson, gave me the idea first. When I first went to college, I wanted to study political science. I was good at it. I understood it. Politics in and of itself, to me, is the same way that people play Monopoly. I could look at politics and understand kind of where the wind is going. But at the end of the day, what does a political scientist do if they don't end up being a political analyst? They end up teaching. And teachers don't make money. And the lifestyle that I'm used to, I need to make money, Dee. And so my mom told me, you know what? Anyone can be a political consultant. You don't need a degree to that, and she's right. And in that vein, she said, study business. With business, you can do anything. And when I started taking business classes, I realized I was good at accounting. The numbers made sense to me. At the end of the day, it was a puzzle. And a puzzle makes sense. And with that, I just started pursuing it and chasing it. And I said, okay, I'm going to switch my major from political science to business with an emphasis in accounting. And that's what I did. And so my fallback has always been, worst comes to worst, I'm a CPA.
Now, if you go into law, what area of law?
Complex commercial litigation and potentially tort. So when two companies finally say, I've had enough of you, I want to fight, and when they do that, they're going to fight to the death. They never hire their own lawyers. They always outsource. So you have your in-house counsels who will do as much as they can, and then they'll retain counsels outside of that to advise them. And then once everything has gone so sideways that they say we're ready to fight, they hire lawyers to fight for them. And that's what I want to do.
And that would be stuff where money's not an issue,
Oh,
right?
no. At the point that two Fortune 500 companies say, I've had enough of you, I'm going to fight you to the death, they will throw as much money at the wall as they can. At that point, it is scorched earth policy. And for me, there's been so much cool legal precedent established from that, where companies decided they wanted to duke it out. We've had case laws that establish whether or not corporations are people or not from that, and the laws that surround that. And when companies decide they want to fight the federal government, that's when big case law comes out.
Can you fight the federal government?
Depends on if you want to win. The answer is you can win once, but once you win against the federal government, they'll probably hunt you down from then on out. And that's a if and when battle. So, for example, how many times has Ford had to look at the federal government and said, we didn't do something wrong? And the federal government said, yes, you did. And Ford said, we're willing to pay a fine to make it where you don't question it again. Versus Ford saying, we did nothing wrong, we'll fight you to the death, and we will try and prove our innocence every single time. Ford doesn't do that. General Motors doesn't do that. Every major corporation doesn't do that because they realize it's a waste of their resources, their time, and energy, and it's bad press.
It's better to just pay the fine?
It's better to pay the fine, sweep it under the rug, and hope people don't realize. But at the end of the day, sometimes companies like Apple versus Microsoft, they've been in litigation against each other with a lawsuit. Apple has sued Microsoft and Microsoft countersued. They've been litigating cases for 20 years against each other.
Not the same case, just different cases?
Two separate cases. There you have two coexisting litigations on separate issues. And for example, the best example I can give people of corporate litigation is Pennzoil v. Texaco. It was tried by arguably my favorite lawyer, Joe Jamel. And he was a Lebanese immigrant who became a lawyer. And in that case, Joe Jamel bankrupted Texaco Oil when he represented Pennzoil in what was then the largest settlement in U.S. history. And it's just because Pennzoil and Texaco said, we're done, we're throwing the gloves off, we're going to have a real fight now.
But the thing is, they just have to employ lawyers and keep sending letters back and forth
and see who has the money to pay the legal fees.
And stall off the court.
Exactly. And eventually, if it goes to trial, it goes to trial. Most of these companies don't care. I want to be the lawyer that when it finally hits trial, I want to be the lawyer standing there in the courtroom. That's because at that point you have such massive litigation, you have massive accusations that it's going to be, one, an exercise of intellect, it's going to be an exercise of actual knowledge of law, and it's going to be showmanship more than anything. That's, any trial lawyer will tell you there's an old joke that goes, the only thing New York lawyer fears is a Southern lawyer because he can tell a better story. And with that being said, it is about that. It's how well can you tell a story, how well can you show off. And that kind of litigation is something that I've been interested in for a long time. And what really made me interested in litigation is mock trial. I started at Macaulay my freshman year, and that's when I realized I want to be a lawyer. And so I joined the mock trial team. I got my first opportunity to try a case in front of actual judges, real attorneys, and I fell in love with it, Dee. And it became an addiction. And so I did it my sophomore year, my junior year, my senior year. By my senior year, I was ranked the 7th best attorney in the state of Tennessee for it. Then I went off to college. I went to the top school for mock trial in America for undergrads, Rhodes College. That was why I picked Rhodes, was I wanted to be a part of their mock trial team. And while I was there, I won awards, and I, at one point, was named one of the top attorneys in the state of Texas at a regional competition. Which I'm not saying that's a. I always like to jokingly say Texas is basically its own country, so to be named in its top 10 was always an honor to me.
You're one of the smartest people I know.
I'm calling
And I've known a lot of people.
You know George McCoyne, he's smarter than me.
A little bit.
Oh, a lot.
And you're working with George now, right?
I am, and let me tell you, it's like working with a master. George is a man who is meticulous, and he understands it beyond what anyone can comprehend. He has forgotten more about real estate law and title law than most lawyers will know in their lifetime. And to be able to be more or less in the tutelage of someone like that is amazing. The stuff he's taught
Just to
me.
watch.
Yes. And, you know, you think you're doing something smart. You think you got it figured out. And George will walk in and say, why'd you not do it this way, this way, this way? You could have done so much quicker. You could have done it so much better. And you sit there and go, well, he's right. The way he breaks things down, he's so methodical. He will hit a pattern. And when George finds something, he chases it down. He's smart like that. And I've seen
He
him.
almost can smell it. You notice that? He can almost smell something wrong.
And it's like he's like Spider-Man when his tingle senses.
Yeah.
He will realize what's happening quick. But working with George is awesome.
Now you're not going to go into real estate law, but this helps you with the corporate stuff, I guess, right?
It helps me understand how to be methodical. And, you know, when you're working with someone like George is so methodical that he has a pattern to every madness. And he will find that pattern. That will help me tremendously, especially in litigation. If I can look for patterns in the way that people do things, if I can look for how it should have been done, that's what George does best. He knows how it should be done every single time. That's why people get mad at George. George will look at people and say, no, I won't do it that way. I do it the right way. Mm-hmm. And by learning what to expect, and if I can apply that to different industries, then I think if I can be half as methodical as George McCoyne, by the time I'm actually practicing law, Dee, I will be very well off.
Do you think that what you said about a minute ago, it reminded me of what the systems can actually take the place of goals. Mm-hmm. You know, the patterns. Mm-hmm. In other words, maybe the guy that gets up and jogs 1 mile every day and goes, his system is to increase it a little bit every day. Mm-hmm. Maybe that guy's better off than the guy that has a goal of running 10 miles. So systems over goals.
Absolutely. Because with a system, you have a game plan. You know, I can sit here and say, Dee, I want to be a billionaire by 40 years old. And I can sit and tell you that for the next 20 years. And at the end of the day, that doesn't make me any step closer to being a billionaire.
But that was your goal.
But it was my goal. But with a system, you know, it makes you incrementally closer to your goal each time. It's a trial and error method. It is tried and true. And through that, you can realize the effectiveness of your goal. As you said, you brought up the people who get up in the morning, who work out. People who get up early, who go work out, who, you know, have an actual routine. You see so much, well, to put it bluntly, they're so much more successful. There was an admiral who used to be I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. I remember watching a convocation speech that he gave to the University of Texas. And he was sitting there saying, he headed the entire Navy SEALs program. And he sat and said, one of the key parts of my success is every day I make my bed. If I start my morning right, every day I start by making my bed. I then go for my morning run. I then do this, that, and the other. He says, by having my pattern, by having my system, I can make myself better each and every day. If there is a ground floor, you won't fall through it.
It's almost like when you get messed up and out of sync, you'll sort of go back to your system. You know, say you had the flu for a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then it'd be easier to go back to your basic system.
And you feel guilty when you can't. I know you and I have talked about this in the past. When you don't get the chance to work out, you feel guilty. When I first started working for George, I'd get up every morning at 4:30 and go work out. And I haven't been able to do that as much lately, and I feel bad about it. It makes me feel bad that I can't work out. Because that was my routine. Every morning at 4:30, I'd get up. By 5 o'clock, I'd be at the gym, and I'd leave the gym by about 6:45. And then I'd start my day. And in that, by having that routine, I felt solid each and every day. I felt tired, but
It's a good tired, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
a different tired.
you feel accomplished. Each and every day you felt accomplished versus I feel beat at the end of the day.
What time did you have to go to bed to get there at 4:30 or 5?
Not early enough. I always would go to bed about 10:30 to 11, and I'd be up by 4:30. And every morning I'd sit there and go, man, I wish I went to bed earlier. But I never learned. There's only so many hours in our day, D.
That is the problem. And
It
if I spent an hour a day doing what I wanted to do, I wouldn't have time to sleep either.
That's right. And even as Elvis said, if I had 48 more in a day, I'd waste them all.
Do you think that systems, that is a really, what you're working now is a system?
Mm-hmm.
What George has got a system for looking at stuff.
Absolutely.
So systems have to be a routine, or if you would use the word routine.
Yeah.
They say that kids that are born in a family that's routine
Are more
generally,
successful.
they're more successful.
Absolutely, and we can see it. A kid who's born into a family where, they have loving parents who are able to assist them and give them a routine, they end up in a more successful setting versus, kids who have instability, who may only be in one-parent households, who just feel unstable. They don't have the same solid, more or less as we've been saying, ground floor to fall onto.
And I don't know why that would necessarily have an effect on them, but evidently it does.
If I had the answer to that, D, I'd be a much richer man than I am now.
But there is evidently something to that we need today as a system. I was reading where they said that people that go to church on Sunday morning are happier because not necessarily this study was because of they're able to have their mind stop the week and start the week, and they had an end. Starting in their mind, it's Sunday morning, it's the end of the week or the start of the week, and so they were able to, I don't know, it just seems to help people.
Absolutely. And with that, it goes back to our routines. With the Sunday morning service, it's people realizing this is the last day of the week, or for some, the first day of the week.
Either way.
But it gives them that hard stop. And now, Dee, here's an interesting study that I read the other day. Conservatives, on average, are more happy than any other group. And after I read the study, it said that people who believe in God, people who have the traditional atomic family, are happier than the neo-normal family. The people who are able to actually enjoy their lives the most are the ones that have a traditional lifestyle.
Not necessarily. When you say traditional, what do you mean? Like,
as in, the two-parent household, one definitely works, one may work part-time, may have a full-time job, but there's definite roles. And in that, there's also people who go to church. And with the church-going crowd, there's a happier median too. And it can be, not just Christians, but any service. So it was standard amongst Christians, Jews, Muslims, and a few other religions that I'm forgetting off the top of my head that were a part of this survey. But in it, they found that the happiness lies in the fact that they had set roles and set routine. Just to go back to our...
That really plays into exactly what we're
talking
about. Mm-hmm. But now some people say, no, I don't want to be on a system. I don't want to be on a schedule. I hate schedules.
That's right. And, you know, you sit and... I saw this a lot. I went to a very liberal arts school. And I saw this all the time when I was there. It was people who were I don't like being on a schedule. I don't like people telling me what to do. I want to do my own thing all the time. But you'd sit and ask them, hey, are you happy? And they'd look at you and go, no, I'm not happy. Why would I be happy? And you'd sit there and go, well, you do everything you want to do. You do the drugs you want to do. You drink when you want to drink. You party when you want to party. You go to the classes you want to go to and you skip the ones you don't. Why aren't you happy? You make all your own decisions. You hold yourself to no accountability. Why are you not happy? And they won't be able to answer you.
Do you think it has to do with the human nature wants to be on a schedule, it wants to be on a routine, and it has to have a mountain to climb or a puzzle to solve or
I think it does.
Purpose?
I absolutely do. Because personally, I sit and watch people, very successful people, who start to retire. John Paul was a great example. Once John Paul stopped, he started going down. And with that, I sit and watch people who have to work. I don't expect my mom will ever retire. She's one of the type of people who has to work. I suspect my dad is also the same way. I know that I get bored very easily, Dee, and when I'm bored, I get miserable. So I feel like I'm the same way. I think it is in human nature to want to accomplish something. Or else, why are we here?
We want to build something.
That's right. And that's one of the scariest parts of today's society, in my opinion, is people don't want to build anything anymore. They see what we have and they say, it's good enough. I hear it's good enough far too often, and I sit there and go, well, why is it good enough? Telling me it can't be better? The life you live, are you happy with it? Or do you think there are certain aspects you can do better? Everything we can do, even in the best circumstances, we fall short. That's the human nature. We can always do something better.
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem. I think we have to keep trying to move forward. I think that's the people that seem to be the happiest. I got this guy that works for me. He's 92. He works every week. Believe it or not, I know people think I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. He really does. And he's on a real tight schedule. Mm-hmm. He's on a daily schedule, a weekly schedule, and he goes to all the jobs every day, 4 days a week, and checks and sees if we need anything, and it helps out. But unfortunately, us as humans, we just have to be striving towards something that maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, so what if we make a bigger house or a bigger patio?
Yeah.
It's almost in vain anyway.
It is. But at the end of the day, typically what we work for is a bigger picture. And at least as Americans, that's what we used to do. We used to see people say, I want to provide not for myself, but for my kids. I want to provide for my grandkids.
That's
That was
the biggest
goal.
picture you're talking about?
Yes, the American dream was I want to give my kids a better opportunity than what I had. I believe it was Adams who said, I think of politics and war, that way my son can think of commerce. That way his son can think of arts, poetry, and music. And I may be slightly paraphrasing that, but in that, he's right. That was always the American dream. But the issue with that is people have become content. People have stopped thinking about commerce. People have stopped thinking about the betterment of society, the politics and war aspect.
Who was it? Who was that guy that said several versions of this? He said, I rode a camel, Am I messing this up?
I'm not sure. I'm listening to see if I
He
recognize
said,
it.
he said, my father rode a camel, I rode a camel, my son drives a car, and his son will ride a camel. And the farmers used to say, short sleeves to long sleeves to short sleeves.
Well, a very similar quote that I know that I think I see where you're getting at. There's an old Roman quote that said, "Good times or strong men create good times make weak men make bad times, and bad times make strong men."
That's it. And that's been said 14 different ways.
Oh yeah, all throughout history. And right now, we're at the point where good times have created weak men, Dee. We see it throughout the United States. We see it in culture. People, I was sitting there at my desk one day, and I sat and thought to myself, why do we sit and listen to half the people that we do? In today's society, if you sit and challenge the norms, let me back up. 50 years ago, if I didn't like an idea, I would approach the idea, I would question it, and people would debate me. They would say, this is why this idea is right. Tell me why you think it is wrong. In today's society, if I go, this idea is wrong, I don't agree with it, they say you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're all sorts of ists. Insert IST. Mm-hmm. And you're bad, you're evil, you should burn in hell for what you say. And you sit there and go, all I did was ask a question. Is your idea so feeble that it cannot withstand any criticism? And I sat and thought to myself, why are we giving the same credence and respect to the people who come up with these such weak ideas, who cannot be challenged, as we are to people like Aristotle? Why are we allowing them to challenge our normal ways of thought when they won't even allow us to challenge theirs at all?
I don't know when that started. You know when it started? I don't know when it started.
I think it I read something the other day, and I really liked it. And I think there are two groups to blame: my generation and the baby boomers. You see, my generation, we're always known as the participation trophy group. But who gave us the participation trophies?
Now, the participation, what do you call them?
Participation trophies.
Now, but now, what is that age group?
I would
roughly?
say anyone born from today all the way to probably about 30. That's the group that I would label that.
And so y'all when we was growing up,
only the winners got a trophy.
At best, you might not even get a trophy.
You got a pat on the back and said, good work, champ.
We saved our trophies.
That's right.
Now they say everybody gets a trophy. But what you're saying is my generation gave you the trophies.
Wanted to so badly make things easier on the next generation that they've made us weak. And that's the issue. You give too many participation trophies away and everyone thinks they're brilliant. Me, I know I'm typically the dumbest person in the room. That's one of my favorite things about going to lunch with the group that we go with.
Yeah.
Is I always like to say I'm the dumbest person there. I get to learn so much by hearing the stories and experience that these men have lived.
It really is amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Really, because I'm one of the young ones.
And just hearing their stories, the lives they've lived, it's phenomenal.
The mistakes they've made.
And how they learn from them.
And they're not embarrassed about it. Have you ever noticed that?
Yes, they learn and grow from it.
Have you ever noticed that not being embarrassed is almost a superpower?
And it can also be crippling.
But if you're not embarrassed by your faults,
Yes, by your own faults and by your mistakes.
it's a superpower.
Yes, if you're willing to look at everything you do and say, I can learn from it, that's what separates the winners from losers. You know, my generation suffers in the fact that we don't know what a winner and a loser is anymore. Some of us have woken up and said, there's a lot of losers in this group. And they're the ones that sit and think they're the greatest.
Because they all got a trophy.
That's right. And you sit there and go, why'd you get the trophy? And they don't like when you ask that question.
Well, you participated. That's
Yeah.
all you did.
Exactly. And when you ask them, did you deserve it? They can't always answer. Versus you sit and ask someone super successful 10, 20 years ago, hey, what'd you do to get that? They can tell you a definitive reason. And that, we've literally lost the meaning of winner and loser. It's everyone's a winner at heart. And that's what's hurting our society. That's not true.
Now, if everybody's like that, why can't everybody just, and I'm playing the devil's advocate.
Absolutely.
Why can't we have everybody be a winner and everybody enjoy the participation? Why do we have to have winners and losers?
Dee, the best example I can give to that, and stick with me, it's going to be a bit of a ride here. So I want you to think back to the Soviet Union, okay? What made the Soviet Union weak is the fact that a doctor was paid the same as a factory worker. Does that encourage the doctor to go out and do more research?
Not
to
at
do
all.
anything beyond what his job is? No. And when we give the best people in our society the same accolades and more or less praise that we give our lowest members of society, the ones who will not contribute, even Marx himself, the founder of communism, said, he who shall not work shall not eat. If we're giving the non-workers food, if we're praising them for stuff they didn't really do, are we really helping ourselves? And that's the question I pose. And the answer, I think, is no. We're hurting ourselves. And from that, it's the same thing. If we give the A+ students the same praise as the kids that show up, are we really helping any of them?
Well, let's suppose that there was and this is hypothetical, let's say there's a kid that was in college, he's a doctor, he can make a lot of money if he finds the cure for cancer.
Mm-hmm.
If he's not going to make a lot of money by finding a cure for cancer, and he's only going to get sued if he don't, what's the point?
And that's the thing. The answer to that, I think the answer to that goes outside the general mindset. It's he shouldn't be there if he isn't willing to take the risk. Think of the men we eat lunch with and just general people who are very successful, Dee. What separates them from the average bear? Are they always more intelligent? I don't believe so.
I don't believe so.
They're willing to take the first step. They're willing to take the risk. They're willing to say, I will do it, when everyone else sits there and goes, that seems risky to me.
Well, now we're talking in terms of money.
Money or just general experience or just willingness. I always sit and say, one of my best friends in the world, his name is Jackson Walker. I'm convinced Jackson is going to be more successful financially than me because Jackson has a very different mindset as me. As we discussed earlier in the show, I like to hedge my bets. I like to have a backup plan before I initiate my first plan. Jackson will jump into something and he will figure out how to do it by will and force. Jackson is brilliant in that and he is willing to take the risk. Versus me who says, I'll take the risk once I have a backup plan. Jackson will say, the risk, I see it, I acknowledge it, I take it.
He'll steal the base in baseball.
He will. versus me who says, I'm going to wait for someone to bunt. And you know, that's, if you look at the people I think we eat with constantly, I think that is an underlying theme with each of them is they'll steal the base. They're the ones who are willing to say, I'll put my neck out there and, you know, if it fails, it fails. What have I got to lose?
And is there a bunch of people that tried it, didn't make it, failed, went bankrupt, lost it all? Is there 50 more to every one of them, or did that person just keep trying?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And sometimes that is the case. And, you know, sometimes you have to look at the field and sit and say, well, it looks a bit rough. Am I willing to do that jump? Am I willing to make that risk? And to each their own.
I'm pretty good at seeing things and saying, sort of running it through my risk-reward thing. What's the risk? What's the reward? Does the reward outweigh
The risk.
the risk? Because if you said, well, I mean, today you could invest all your money in Twitter or into the Trump social media. You might make millions and you might go broke.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, sit and look at Netflix. 10 years ago, that was the golden boy stock. And today, because, you know, one, they've been mismanaged and all sorts of things, but by the risk, if you stuck with Netflix or you joined in about a year ago when it seems like it was the top of the world.
$600 a share?
It's
something
now
like
what,
that?
like 170?
I think it fell Friday to 163.
Yeah. I mean,
Can you imagine buying it at 600?
exactly. And that's the point, is the people who sit and stick with it, they'll sit and say, it may come back up. But the risk takers, they see opportunity. Look at Elon Musk with Twitter. Twitter was on the decline. It had been running itself into the ground by bad management for a long time. Elon Musk sees an opportunity. When Netflix shares are about 1/5, 1/4 of what they were previously trading earlier this year, it's an opportunity to try and reform a company. Risk takers will see it. There are stock traders out there, Dee, and I'm sure you hear the stories, where they'll do long-term hedge bets or they'll do short bets, where they'll say, I know 19 of my investments are going to fail. If one of them hits, that 20th one, it'll pay off all my losses, plus I'll double my money. There's people in New York City that make fortunes doing that. And it's the people who are willing to take risks in this world that I think honestly get the most reward.
And they know that 19 of those are going to
Going to fail.
You know, that's a good play. You could buy something at $6, 20 of them at $6. Half of them go down $3, half of them go up $3, and one goes to $30.
Exactly, and by that point you've hedged your bet, you recover what you lost, and at the end of the day...
And you claim your losses on the others.
And that's why there are people in New York City that can do math that makes your head and my head boggle, who are making more money than we can believe.
All on sense.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and theories.
Exactly.
Whereas me and you, I would buy CocaCola and hope it goes up.
And pray that they don't do something stupid.
Yeah, like put on it, Be More White or something.
That's right, or Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Teach our kids how to be gay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
That, you know, there's this old mantra, go woke, go broke. And I think a reckoning is about to happen to a lot of companies. And on my short list of companies that's about to get hit upside the head is Nike.
I would not doubt it.
Think of all the companies that we've seen. Walt Disney has lost $50 billion in their market cap this year alone. We've watched Netflix lose 75 to 60%, 75 to about 66% of their market cap, just because they couldn't keep their mouths shut.
Well, and another thing, why don't they just stay in their lane?
And-
if Nike makes shoes, Netflix makes movies, let Disney make rides.
And let Disney make movies and rides. And,
Yeah.
you know, to you and I, that seems like simple business practice.
Yeah.
Why would these companies do it?
Why
And
would
Dee-
Coca-Cola want to put anything on their bottle other than Coca-Cola have a Coke and a smile?
That's right. And there's a great answer, Dee. Instead of, you and I understand business by shareholder equity. If I own the company, by God, I control the company. My voice is the only one that matters. Everyone else is wrong because I own the darn thing. I put the money up.
Yeah.
These companies are now practicing an idea where it's, I work for the company. Thus, I should have more of a say than the shareholder. And on top of that, you know who else's voice is more important than a shareholder? Is our clientele. Now, Dee, between you and me, we understand that a clientele is always going to say, well, if I can pay less, then I can.
Sure.
So that obviously goes against the better business practice. The definition of a firm, if you take Business 101, definition of a firm is to increase shareholder equity and profit, to make the owners the richest they can be. That is Business 101.
Yeah.
The new idea is, well, how does it make the people at our company feel? What about the people who buy our stuff? You know, 50 years ago, a CEO that would hear that would say, well, I don't give a crap. If they don't like what we do, they can go somewhere else and let the market deal with it itself.
That's right.
Walt Disney would say if they don't like what we put out, they can go to Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers would say the same thing. Coca-Cola, 50 years ago, if someone said, well, we don't like the fact that you're not as inclusive, Coca-Cola would say, well, we don't care. Go buy Pepsi if you want, but neither one of us cares about these issues. We're here to sell you a soft drink.
That's all we're doing.
Yes, and these companies are learning the very hard way that going into the social arena is a very unprofitable venture. And look at Walt Disney in Florida. They lost their exclusive tax benefits in the state of Florida. Something that will cost them in the tune of, I believe, well over $10 billion is what I've read in taxes. Just in the state of Florida.
So DeSantis is staying with that, right?
Yes, and the last I read about it is it's being held up in court. And
I think he was wafering a little bit or something. I don't know.
Because it's going to cost the people of Orlando about $2 billion because they've removed the exclusive area. But at the end of the day, Walt Disney played a stupid game and they won a very bad prize.
That's right.
And these companies are realizing it's going to hit them upside the head. And so I suspect Nike's going to be on the short list.
Are we sure it's going to hit them in the head? I mean, it's looking like that because Twitter was going down.
Twitter, Nike, or not Nike yet, but Twitter.
What about YouTube?
YouTube is owned by Facebook, and Facebook it hasn't taken a shellacking yet. But Facebook, if the Twitter deal goes through and Twitter becomes more of a free market than Facebook, Zuckerberg is going to be in danger.
Even if he comes out with this new metaverse.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if people are able to actually say what they want to say on one website, why would they put up with being told, you can't say that here? That's like saying, all right, Dee, let's go to a restaurant. But the restaurant, if you try and order what you want, will tell you you can't have it. You got to choose. You have to accept whatever they let you pick. There's a menu, but it's wrong. You only get what they say is on the menu. Well, that's...
You're going to say,
why would I go to that restaurant?
I'll go to the bowling alley. They got hot dogs.
That's right. I can.
It's loud.
I can get a beer, have a hot dog, and I can have some fun in the process.
And some nachos.
That's right. And at the end of the day, these companies, like Walt Disney, they're figuring out. They should have just stayed in the industry of making movies.
Well, I almost think they get. Yeah, that's an example of what we should do. We should really just stay in our lane.
Yes.
You ever notice these? I know a guy that did real successful in his business. Then he opened up a clothing store, then he opened up a restaurant, then he went broke. He should have just stayed with what made him successful. And that's the same thing with these companies. They don't need to be getting involved in politics or social stuff. Just make Coca-Cola, make movies.
And more importantly, why should we listen to you? Why should anyone listen to Walt Disney about how to raise a kid?
Yeah, why are we even giving it air?
Exactly. And the reason why is they pay a lot of money to Washington, D.C. And anyone who has the type of gravitas that these companies have, when Walt Disney sits there and says, well, we don't support this because it goes against our company values, you sit and look at them and go, Walt Disney, what is your company values? I thought you stood for families. Who's your primary consumer?
Yeah.
It's the mom and dad or parents who pay for their kids to go to your theme parks, to watch your movies, that take them to the theater. 9 out of 10 times a Walt Disney customer, its intended audience is under the age of 12. Why in God's green earth would they sit and say to the people who take their primary audience to the marketplace, we don't like the way you're doing it? It doesn't make sense.
They've lost their mind.
They have. And it's because they've stopped caring about shareholder equity. The shareholders of these massive corporations need to have meetings, and they need to sit and say, why are you doing this? How does this make me more money? At the end of the day, I think if a board of directors cannot explain to their shareholders, well, we came out in favor of opposing this bill in Florida because it would make us more money by doing X, Y, Z.
That's what they're there for then,
Yes.
right?
But if they say, well, it makes us feel uncomfortable and thus we don't like it, and instead of using our money and resources to prevent it, we're using your money. Well, Dee, if someone said that to me, I'd hit them upside the head.
Yeah.
I'd be very unhappy. And I think what we're seeing, especially in society, is a shift. People are waking up to this and the fact that there's been a culture war that we weren't aware of.
We weren't aware.
No. And today, people like Governor Ron DeSantis are really good at this. They point it out. They say, this is what it is. This is why it's happening. This is how it affects you. And this is why it needs to stop. And conservatives have managed to rally up a very interesting base. For the first time ever, Dee, parents have become a voting bloc. Before this, we've seen only, ethnicity, race, and socioeconomic class. When you're looking at politics, those were the three things you use. You could always say, a Hispanic from Miami will vote like this. A white man from Chattanooga will vote like this. A black man from Houston will vote like this. And you can make general predictions because we had the data, we understood it. We've never had to ask the question, well, what happens if you make the parents mad? It's because parents have never voted in singularity. We watched it in the state of Virginia with Governor Youngkin. For the first time ever, parents got mad because a school district tried to cover up rapes. And the parents said, no, that's not acceptable. And it riled up middle-class families in Virginia, and specifically parents who said, the current way is not acceptable. In Florida, we see them getting riled up because Governor DeSantis in polls is only getting more popular in the state of Florida. And it's wild because nowadays people are waking up to the idea that, hold on, everything that I've held as just normal is being attacked.
We didn't know it.
No.
Now, if you get on Twitter, and I get on Twitter, and when I see it on Twitter, about 4 days later, I see it on the news. That's how current Twitter is.
And that's assuming you get to see it unfiltered.
That's assuming that. So prior to that, there is a big alternate war, social war going on that people are oblivious of.
Absolutely. And the best example of that, Dee, that I can give was about 2 weeks before the actual election day for the 2020 election. The New York Post published an article about Hunter Biden's laptop. And every major media and internet company blocked the syndication of that story. We saw it with Facebook, we saw it with Twitter, we saw it with Instagram, Google, Yahoo, and Bing. All said that's misinformation. You're not allowed to tell that. You need to stop that right now. Now, Dee, I started doing some research. I started digging into it. Beyond the immensely perverse images on that laptop, there are some really damaging emails between Hunter Biden and his business associates. There's emails between Hunter Biden and the now president of the United States, Joe Biden, about illegal business dealings. And they sat and said, this is misinformation. You're not allowed to discuss this, ever, period. How could you ever think about this? And at the end of the day, you and I as individuals didn't get to read those emails. We didn't get to see those images. We didn't get to understand what was actually happening until 6-7 months after that story broke. And what else are they hiding from us? These companies have an interest in preventing us from seeing the truth at all times.
And I don't really know what it is, do you? I mean, us even talking about that, this may be taken down.
It could be.
I've had them been taken down because of political stuff, and I didn't even know it was political, much less this.
Exactly.
So it may be, it's almost, I don't want to be a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but man, you gotta wonder.
And Dee, I think the answer to that is what we discussed at lunch the other day. It's not that there is a standing cabal of evil people who sit and say, this is how we want to shape the world today. Everyone must believe in this. It's not a grand conspiracy. It's people acting in their own self-interest in an immensely bad way. You see, previously we just discussed about how in America we used to act for the betterment of society and future generations. Today, I think the mindset is very simple. It is, I'm here to make myself money. I'm here to better myself. I don't care what happens to the future. And that's a very dangerous mindset.
And do you think that is making it look like there's some big conspiracy behind the curtain deal going on, that it just looks like that to us?
In some ways I do. And the fact that, let's break it down in a very generalized way. A news company, he's a fellow Macaulay alum, but Ted Turner, I believe, is the first person to blame in this. When he created 24-hour news with CNN.
Yeah.
CNN realized very quickly in the early 80s, late 70s, that they could sell more ad space if they created doom and gloom. And so what do they start running? They start running doom and gloom constantly. Well, all the other news companies sit and watch CNN and say, well, hang on, they're making more money than us. Let's copy them. Well, now when you flip on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, Fox News, how often do you hear a happy story?
It's all bad news. They'll put in a happy story about 1 every 3.
That's right. And so all of them are doom and gloom. So the media is trying to sell more ad space. They're trying to give you doom and gloom. Well, an unintended side effect of that is the politicians over here. The politicians are saying, well, if you look at the news, it's all doom and gloom. You have to understand that my idea is the best, and if you don't believe me, you're a sack of shit. Here's why. I'll fix it this way.
They're the itch, I'm the scratch.
Yes. And then the politicians play off them. It's not an intended conspiracy. I doubt the news networks are going to reach out to the politicians and say, I intend only to run doom and gloom to make your campaign better.
Right. I don't think that's
And the politicians are going to respond to them saying, well, yes, I hope you do that. That way I can seem like a much better person, when in reality I am just someone who likes to seem like a tinfoil hat guy who screams at the sky. But at the end of the day, they become successful because it only seems like doom and gloom. And when they become successful, what happens? Let's take Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Beto O'Rourke out of Texas. They sit and say, well, obviously since it's all doom and gloom, we're going to take your guns. Well, what does Remington, Beretta, Barrett here in Tennessee, insert gun company here. What do they say? Well, if they're going to try and take our guns, you better buy guns now. That way you can stop them.
Yeah.
And they're not going to sit and say, well, the politicians are full of crap and the
They're
news
not going
companies
to
are
take
full
your
of crap.
guns. Don't buy them.
Yeah, exactly. They're sitting here saying this is the best marketing we could have asked for. And then it goes on and on and on. It becomes a web of lies. And it seems like a grand conspiracy. But I believe it's just people who stopped acting in good faith. In America, it used to be we all try and better ourselves. That's the difference between us and socialists. We give to society because we want to and we want to make it better. Socialist says you have to give it to us or else you're worthless and we'll kill you. In America, it's we give because we can, because we should. That's the American way. And with that, people stop saying I need to give because I should. And from that, everyone started acting so selfishly that it started hurting us so badly.
Do you think it will change that? Because economics changes everything, right?
Yes, I agree very much with Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market. So the idea that eventually the markets, and you can apply the invisible hand idea not just to business, but to social activity. Eventually people will sit and look at things and go, hang on, that's not really acceptable. Why did we say that was acceptable? And they take their interest in it and they give it to somewhere else. So in the same way that I don't like doing business with this place anymore, I'll do business with this other store. People will sit and say, I don't know why I supported this idea at first. It's unacceptable. Here's what we have.
So for a while,
it will be bad. And I think what we're seeing now is a very good sign. It's that average Americans, Reagan's silent majority, is waking up again to these crazy ideas, these notions that we are inherently bad. Howard Zinn wrote a book, it's A People's History of America. And in that book, or People's History of the United States, in that book, he basically outlines why America is bad in every way by trying to take the victim side of everything. Mm-hmm. He doesn't sit and say, how did it better society? It's always, America's bad because it hurt this group. Not, America is good because we advanced our society.
Right.
Our school kids aren't being taught that anymore. And now parents are waking up to that. And we're waking up to the idea that everything that we believe to be true, honest, and good is under attack. And it has been under attack for the last 20 years without us knowing.
There for a while, I almost felt apologetic for trying to make money.
Exactly. And that's how they wanted us to feel. They wanted us to feel bad for being successful. And
greedy.
Yes.
Greed is good. Isn't that what that movie said? What was that movie? Greed is good?
I'm assuming Wolf of Wall Street.
Yep. No, it wasn't Wolf of Wall Street. It was a forerunner of that.
But I believe that in some ways...
It is good.
It is. As long as you don't allow greed to control you. That's where we're at right now, is greed controls society. We need to have good people who want to make money control our society. Our founding fathers were all businessmen, very successful businessmen, who created our nation in the idea that it should be a prosperous economy for all. Eventually, all people. But at the end of the day, it was the idea. And that was the most important part of it, is the idea, the foundation. Without that, we just fall through the floor.
Now, what happens, if you go back even 70 years ago or 50s, 50 is a good thing, but they've even got us now questioning the dollar bill. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin and it's just if you had fell asleep 50 years ago and woke up today, you'd need psychiatric help.
Absolutely. And you would sit and say, why are all these mental patients walking along our streets? We live in a society today that is so different than what America was founded on. Think of America's most prosperous time ever. It was after World War II.
40s or 50s?
Yeah. Between World War II and the Korean War,
Which
is
is what
considered 45 to, I believe, 62. Is that right?
They said that
Somewhere in there?
They said the 50s was the greatest decade to grow up.
Yes.
You had Elvis, you had Happy Days, you had. That's why
right.
they called it Happy Days.
And it was the atomic family. It's the dad went off to work, mom may go to work, mom stays at the home. It's we build a society. We are all a brick in the wall that is America. And at the end of the day, if we all start removing ourselves, saying, I don't want to be a part of this, well, that wall's going to crumble, Dee. And I believe that that time period, when people actually used common sense, when we called bad things bad because it was bad, instead of saying, well, it's just the way they think, it's the way they do things, it's insert excuse here for any plethora of group. You know, Dee, at the end of the day, people will look at you and me and say, we're bad because our goal in life is to make money. But at the end of the day, are we bad for that? That's a question that you and I have to ask ourselves. But at the end of the day, we're also asking the question, are they bad because they don't contribute to the economy? Each of us values something different nowadays. And I think that's what's hurt our country so much. Our country used to be founded on the idea and very strongly influenced by the idea that we all are a part of this country. Think of when you were a kid. What's the first thing you did at school every morning once the bell rang?
Pledge allegiance.
Same with me. Today's schools don't do that.
They don't even do that?
I'm sure some here in Bradley County do. I'm sure in the state of Tennessee and mostly through the South. I know most schools in the state of California don't.
Why would you not pledge allegiance to the place that's educating? I don't understand.
Exactly. The place that gives you a home. The best country in the world.
I mean, don't you root for your team?
And
isn't that the same thing?
And that's the thing. Right now, it sounds like America is a bunch of, Cubs fans before they won the World Series again. They're always going on. If we fix something now, we can make it better eventually.
I mean, what's there to apologize for?
I mean, sure. What I like to say is my favorite conspiracy theory is that the government is efficient, effective, and will do no wrong.
Yeah.
That's my favorite conspiracy theory because the government is very ineffective, it is very inefficient, and it has done some very bad things. My favorite example is look at, for example, the CIA. I don't trust them one bit.
Who's in charge of the CIA?
I don't know its current director's name, but it falls under the executive branch and I believe the Department of Justice, but I'd have to go back and check that. But definitely the director of the CIA reports to the President of the United States.
And do you not trust them because of what you've read in the news and they're trying to sway you? I mean, you don't really actually know them.
I mean, think of all the things think of what they've released to us. Freedom of Information Acts have released some horrifying details that the CIA have done, like MK Ultra, where the CIA would literally pick people up from psychiatric hospitals, give them a massive amount of acid, and sit and try and brainwash them.
Didn't Helter Skelter, wasn't he involved in that?
I don't personally know that.
I think he was in that
he could have well been
trial. I think that's what made him that way.
But at the end of the day, there's, that's just one example. One that's really close to us, Dee, was Project Paperclip. This is one that most Americans don't know existed. And it's close to us because of Huntsville, Alabama. It's from where Nazi scientists were brought to the United States by the Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. government and told, we will give you full immunity for everything you've done if you help us with X project. And the biggest one was get us to space. Dr. Werner von Braun was a Nazi war criminal. He used slave labor of Jews in Nazi Germany to build V-2 rockets. He is also known as an American hero for being the scientist that led NASA to get us to the moon. People don't know that fact, and that's a terrifying thing to me. Think of Nicaragua, a local church that I will not say out loud, but a very large church here in Cleveland, Tennessee, was tricked into smuggling guns on behalf of the CIA to Nicaragua in 1954 to help the CIA with insurgent efforts. You can look that up, and to all the viewers out there, you all can look it up too. 1954, and insert churches in Cleveland, Tennessee, you'll find it. But the issue is that when you see the bad actors, think of Iran-Contra. Why were we selling drugs to Americans to buy guns from the Middle East to ship to Latin America? How many times have we toppled governments? We implemented a king in Iran, and now Iran has hated us since the fall of the Shah. 1972 to be more precise.
And Reagan couldn't remember. Remember that? He said, I don't remember.
Yeah, exactly. And I love Ronald Reagan, but he had full knowledge of the Iran-Contra. There's no doubt in my mind.
Maybe we're better off for that.
And we could be. And the argument was to stop communism. Every time the CIA stepped in those periods, and these are the ones we know about.
Yeah.
Think about what we're doing today.
That's right.
We don't know.
They didn't know then.
Exactly, they didn't. And their argument then was we were doing these illegal things because we had to save America. And you sit and say, well, how did it save America? And you look at what they did and you sit and say, this didn't save America. All this did was topple a third world country and put in a dictator that ended up hating America.
That's given us trouble ever since.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I don't trust the U.S. federal government to act any better than, any other government. But the issue is, and I think Ronald Reagan said it best, is the 9 scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And we sat and lived through this recently with COVID. Think about how many times the government gave out checks, how many trillions of dollars were spent that have now put us in a linchpin in our economy.
Plus, now some people are just going to sit back and wait for the next check.
And hope it comes. And that's the scary part. We've created a monster.
It's almost... What do you think about Bitcoin and Dogecoin? And I don't quite understand them. I mean, if you go back, do you understand the concept that economics? I keep calling it economics. Which is
you can say it either way.
Economics.
Economics and economics are the same thing. It's just where you're born.
Let's say economics. People say, oh, the stock market went down. Boy, it's about economics. But I say, no, economics is simply the availability of supplies
and demand
and labor. It's available. It's a good economy.
Exactly.
Now, money is just a database. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It is what we use to value. It is literally just the placeholder. Dee, when you build a house or you build a commercial unit, you're being paid for 3 things. For your brain power of how to build it, your availability to build it, and the labor to build it, and the resources.
And I'm going to trade that
in exchange for more or less shiny rocks and metal.
That's right. So, but what I'm saying is, money is just a
placeholder,
a database. I call it. Am I saying it right?
You could in some way call it a database. I like to call it a placeholder because at the end of the day, what you're trading is not really the paper. It's the value of the paper.
The data.
And so with cryptocurrency, it is more or less. It could be considered a database, especially with like Ethereum with, I'm forgetting what it's called. It's they always refer to it as the chain. And in the chain, you can see every trade, you can see every piece of information about that currency. And it may come to me later.
I can't think of the name of it.
But to address your previous question, what do I think about it? I look at cryptocurrency a lot like I do gold. Gold and cryptocurrency are very similar. When the dollar bill goes down, crypto goes up. And when the dollar bill goes down, gold goes up. It's a way to hold value without being in the dollar. It's a hedge.
Right.
And with that, the most terrifying thing to me is the United States federal government sitting there saying, we may introduce our own coin, or we may try and take over the crypto market. That's not the point of the crypto market. It's the same as buying gold. It's to get away from the federal government's ability to manipulate and control my value or my money, my labor.
Well, let's call it a dollar, not a database. Let's just call it a calculation.
Okay.
That is a calculation of your ring.
Yes.
In other words,
And what it
me
took
and
to
you
get this ring.
agree that this calculation is worth the same amount as your ring.
Absolutely.
So-
And in that value of that ring and in our calculation, we have to consider the poor guy in Africa who dug that gold out of the ground. The rich Dutchman who was sitting there who plucked that gold out of the poor African's hand and said, this is worth this in my head, I'll ship it to America. And then it gets molded into this ring. It all has to be calculated in.
But let's face it, that ring is just a
Shiny piece of
just
metal.
it's just a shiny piece of metal. It's almost
In the
it's
same,
almost silly. Does that make sense?
It is. And scientists have observed this in other animals. Penguins like to give each other shiny rocks. Humans have realized the scarcity of certain things. We're intelligent enough to know there's only so much gold in the world. Thus, if I were to trade gold to copper, there's a lot more copper than gold. I should get
Yeah.
a certain amount more of copper for my gold. And in that, the scarcity is what makes it valuable. At the end of the day, if the world ends today, Dee, if the government dissolves, if we're in an apocalypse setting, everyone on their own, farm your own land, kill anyone who comes on your property, it's a zombie apocalypse.
People say, well,
shine.
gold will always be worth it. Not in those cases.
No.
It's sticks and stones.
That's right. And the value of a shiny watch or a new car means nothing,
Nothing.
whenever we hit certain circumstances. But in our very industrialized world, it holds value in scarcity. And the same thing exists in crypto. The best example I give you is Bitcoin. Bitcoin mining has become exponentially more expensive, just in the fact of the scarcity of the coins themselves. 15 years ago, you could have got easily hundreds of Bitcoins if you were an early miner because of the distribution pattern of Bitcoin. And as the years go on, it will become more and more rare to a finite amount. There's only so much. Once we hit that amount, there will be no more. At that point, we've hit it.
But so are baseball cards.
With the exception that more baseball cards can be printed. And sure, someone could alter the code to Bitcoin to make more coins, but that's not how it works. And it aligns a lot with gold. There's only so much gold in the ground. And once we move it all out of that ground, how much is it worth? Because we have the finite amount.
You know, if I always often thought if, you know, one thing everybody uses and will not do without is power, electricity,
Yes.
and or water. Hello, I'm Dee Burris, and most of you know me as a general contractor. In October of 2020, I started a podcast that I call The Discussion with Dee Burris. Each week, I have conversations with interesting, informative, and fascinating people from Cleveland and Bradley County and the surrounding areas. You can watch the discussion at dburris.com on YouTube and Facebook, where we would ask you to please subscribe, it's free, for updates and notifications of new shows. It's no problem. So if you had this big place and you said, I'm trading, we're all protecting this water and power.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had a coin that represented so much water and power.
You get this
now
much
I would
power.
have something instead of a shiny coin that's not going to do unless you're conducting electricity through
it. Yeah, and that's a very good point. And that's a commodity.
It'd be a commodity then that's protected. Now we got some. Otherwise, it's like the tulip. What, the tulip bulbs? Mm-hmm. Remember when they used to trade tulip bulbs?
I don't specifically know that. I'm assuming Native Americans or something
No,
like
they
that.
used to trade in England the tulip bulbs.
Really?
Yeah, they used to be real expensive, and they just got more and more expensive till they finally somebody said, I don't like
need
tulip
'em."
bulbs. You never heard of that?
No.
I finally hit on something you didn't know.
Well, that's pretty cool. I'll have to look into that, Dee.
Yeah, the tulip. Was it tulips, Gwen?
I think it was.
I think it's tulips, yeah. But anyway, but all of this stuff is, when it gets out of the norm, I mean, if you was to go back, how long ago was it when it was real important to have a buggy whip?
You know, I'd say the last time that it was real important was probably the late 30s, before cars were readily available to everyone.
You needed a buggy whip.
Mm-hmm. If you wanted to get from point A to point B in time.
Or something that acted like a buggy whip.
Yeah. To get the cart moving.
Now, you could have gone into business in 1920, opening up a factory, and they said, "What are you going to do?" "Well, I'm going to make buggy whips."
And they would have said, "That's a brilliant idea."
Brilliant idea. Boy, he's going to do really good in the buggy whip business.
Mm-hmm. And then Henry Ford comes along and ruins your day.
All of a sudden, overnight.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard these stories that change happens just very slow and very incrementally, and then all at once.
Yes. And to that vein is, I always tell people, if you ever want to invest, if you can read the news, you can see what the market's going to do. If you know how to read the news. My favorite example is, think back to 2016. You remember when Volkswagen got hit with the EPA scandal?
I remember that.
I looked at all my friends and said, well, if Volkswagen failed it, I would bet everything in the world that Fiat Chrysler is going to fail. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, what did the EPA do? The EPA announced that it's going to investigate Fiat Chrysler. And from that, I knew where to invest. If you can see a pattern, humans are very good at this. If you can read the news and see what's happening in the world,
and be able to read it without getting biased, right?
Exactly. And think, when Ukraine was announced, when it was announced that Vladimir Putin was putting his soldiers along the border of Ukraine, my first thought was, okay, in a business sense, where does the money go? Well, America's not going to get immediately involved in this war, but who supplies the weapons to the Ukrainians? The U.S. government. Where does the U.S. government get their weapons? Well, Lockheed Martin, of course. Boeing. Insert companies here. The companies that have contracts with the U.S. federal government would be very good bets. And I haven't looked at those charts, but I'm willing to bet since Ukraine, Lockheed Martin and Boeing have gone up. I'm willing to bet on that. Just in the same way that if in 2001 you were invested in Lockheed Martin before 9/11, you would be very rich after.
Remember I remember, and you're probably way too young, but I remember when this guy would come into to all of his department stores, and he'd sit up on a stool and talk to all the employees from a bullhorn, and that was Sam Walton.
Mm-hmm.
So if you'd have read that in the newspaper and been able to think that, now this guy's going to go somewhere, you could have been worth millions. Or if you'd have read about, I remember reading about Bill Gates when he wasn't nothing. He was just trying to get a personal computer started.
And Steve Jobs in his garage.
So who is it now? What is going to do away with the buggy whip?
I think the next big one, in my opinion, the man that the world can hedge its bet on, is Mr. Elon Musk.
For certain.
Elon,
Which is the one that called money simply a database.
yes.
He was quoted as saying that.
And I believe Elon is brilliant. Do you know how Elon first made his money?
He called me.
Did he?
No. No, I remember PayPal, right?
Yes, exactly. Online money transfers. That was visionary for his day.
Visionary.
He then found two guys who created a little electric car company called Tesla. And he said, okay.
Now, what about, where did Peter Thiel come in?
Peter Thiel, I believe, was early. He wasn't.
A partner in PayPal or
He's
Oracle?
either a partner or he created his own variation. I think he was a partner in PayPal.
I think he was a partner in PayPal.
He was, if I remember correctly, a coder, but I'd have to go back and check. Like, I've read one of his autobiographies, and it was years ago. I remember it because I had to read it for I think my junior reading at Macaulay. And it was a little blue book. It was about this thick. And I stood in there thinking, well, this man really thinks a lot of himself. But honestly, Elon is brilliant because
Genius.
I remember in 2014, I was sitting at a friend's dinner table. His father was an executive for Volkswagen. And I looked at his father and said, have you all ever considered trying to procure Tesla, or has your corporate office ever considered it before it becomes a threat to the combustion engine? He goes, they're too small. It's too small. It makes no sense for us to do that now. Why would we do that? It costs us so much versus what we can outproduce them in. Well, now look at what every group in America, from Ford to Volkswagen to Toyota and Honda, they all have to make an electric car just to try and compete.
You know, I often think of, you ever see those old, when I think of Tesla, this always goes into my mind, but they used to actually have like gas-powered toasters that would toast bread.
I haven't seen those.
Years after they'd put them in the fire, they'd put bread in there and toast the bread and turn the thing over. So you think which one of those things are better than the electric toaster?
Yeah,
None.
exactly.
Nothing. When's the last time you sent your toaster to a repair shop? There's nothing to go broke.
No.
A new tire, and now they're coming out with these new carbon fiber tires that look like they don't even have air in them.
Yeah. And, you know, the innovation that we see in today's world is, I forget the actual name of it. There was a man in the 90s, and you all can fact check me later. There was a man in the 90s who created this idea that technology grows exponentially. And his key theory was behind computer chips. Think of what 10 gigabytes used to be. It would have in the 1960s, 10 gigabytes would have filled this entire room. We're easily sitting in what, a 25 by 10?
10 by, or no, we're in a 12 by 60.
Yeah. But it would have filled a room this size. It's huge. Nowadays, 10 gigabytes is laughable. I can carry a terabyte. I don't have a phone that's that big. I have one that's exponentially larger than that in my pocket. This thing here has more storage space than the rocket that got us, the Saturn V rocket that got us to the moon. And he theorized, just by computer chips alone and computer storage, that through time, the amount that we can store is exponential. And if you look at just general technology advancements, my best example is my dad fell down the stairs earlier this year, shattered his humerus bone, shattered his elbow, had to have complete reconstruction of those. He literally had the humerus come out the back of his arm, had to have his arm completely reconstructed. 20 years ago, that would have been a life-changing, life-altering event. Your arm would have never been the same. 50, 60 years ago, you would have, the arm
And
would
you'd have died of sepsis.
Yeah, the arm would have been completely useless if they could save it at all. My dad already has full range of motion back in that arm. So that's just advancements in medical. think about what we've been able to accomplish with phones. Phones is, I'm back to this little device in my pocket. The thing that's made my generation stupid is from, 20 years ago, something the size of this in dimension, a literal brick,
A little bigger than that.
to this, which I can instantly find any fact of information. I can FaceTime someone on the other side of the world. Tantamount to Star Trek.
Probably. It does everything except teleporting.
Yeah. And you have to ask, when are we going to get it?
You know, they're doing that now with some lightweight metals.
I did not.
Yeah, they're doing very lightweight metals. They're able to take the molecules out and transport them.
And
But I don't know how they could do that with a body. You'd have to put the eyes and everything out.
And Dee, I leave it to smarter people than you and me, because if it was up to us, it could be a mess.
It would be a mess. I'd change where I'm looking now, wouldn't
That's
you?
right.
What do you think about this theory that we're in a simulation, that we're not part of?
Lord.
That's getting way out there, isn't it?
Well, I'll go down the rabbit hole with you. I always refer to Descartes. Descartes was a philosopher who came up with this very simple phrase, "Gato ergo sum." I think, therefore I am. So Dee, we're going to do a little experiment. You ready?
Okay.
On the count of 3, you're going to name a number between 1 and a trillion. And I'm going to name a number between 1 and a trillion. You ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Negative a billion.
Yeah.
Well, you see, Dee didn't answer.
Yeah.
And I broke the rules. In that, I didn't know Dee wasn't going to answer, and Dee didn't know that I was going to break the rules. So what makes that brilliant is the fact that we didn't know what each other was going to do. Thus, I know you're real, because I can't predict what you're going to do. If we're both computer code, a computer code can sense a computer code. It understands and can predict.
What if everything around us is a simulation, but we're just put in this scenario?
If we're in a matrix,
a matrix.
well, I'm happy to live in it, if that's the case. But I don't think we are. I believe that we are in a situation where we only have a finite amount of time.
You think God's in control?
That's a very interesting question. I believe that God created all. And by that I mean he set everything in motion. I believe in the clockmaker theory. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's that God knows everything that's going to happen. He created this beautiful universe. He set it in motion, and he stepped back and watched his creation unfold. And in that, I believe that he doesn't interfere as much as we like to believe he does. And to go towards that is more or less of a joke / story. There's a man, he's out in the ocean, and he's sitting there, and while he's there, his boat starts to sink. And he goes, "Oh God, please save me. Please save me from drowning." Well, the boat finally sinks and he's treading water. He's treading water, and this boat comes by. Well, the boat goes, "Well, fella, it looks like you need some help." Well, the guy who's treading water goes, "No, I'm waiting for God to save me." And the guy in the boat offering to help him goes, "You're lost, buddy. Good luck." And he goes off. Well, another boat eventually comes by and goes, "Buddy, you look kind of tired. Let's help. Come on, get on my boat." And he goes, "No, I am waiting for God to save me." And so, after arguing for a bit, the boat driver goes on. Eventually, at this point, he's nearly drowning. His head keeps bobbing up and under the water, and a helicopter appears. And they try and save him. And he says, go away, I'm waiting for God." Well, he finally drowns. He gets to the pearly gates. And once he gets through the pearly gates, he meets God. He goes, "God, why did you not save me?" And God said, "I had known what was going to happen to you. I sent 2 boats and a helicopter anticipating what would happen to you before it ever happened. And you're the one who said no. You can't blame me." And that's how I view how God acts, is he knows what's going to happen to us. It's our responsibility to act, to take the risk, to follow the plan.
Not necessarily to guide us.
No. I think he gave us a set of rules. I think he gave us the ideas in our heads. The beauty of us is we're all independent. He gave us free will. That's an amazing gift. And in that, he taught us how to think. He taught us what to believe.
But what if some people are stupid?
Well, think when God asked Cain, "Where is your brother?" He responded. My favorite thing ever is the Hebrew translation. Do you know what it says?
He said, I'm not my brother's keeper.
Yes, but the actual Hebrew is a bit funnier than that. It's a joke. It responds, "What am I? A brother shepherd?" He's asking.
Was that the real version?
Yes, that's if you translate direct from Hebrew, it's more or less a joke. It says, "What am I? A shepherd of people?" And God looks at him and goes, "Yeah, you kind of are. You're his brother." And in that, we have to ask ourselves, are we accountable? Are we accountable to everyone? I'm not telling people go out there, stand on your street corner and hit people upside the head with a Bible and hope the word gets in their head. But I'm sitting there telling you, stand for something. It goes back to what we've been discussing. Stand for what is right. Don't let people who don't know how to live a good life tell you how to live your life.
If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
That's right. That's a very good point.
But going back to God, the clock theory. That I understand that theory. I've heard that theory, but some people say the clock theory is that it goes around and comes back to the same thing, and the same thing happens again and again. So there's lots of theories out there, but do we go by the Bible, the Hebrew Bible?
We could.
Is that what you would think is authentic?
What I always advocate for has never been very popular in at least the Bible Belt, but the Bible is not a history book. It's not a science book. It's a book to give you guidance. God didn't intend for you to view it as hard, cold facts. He gave it as examples, as stories, and as ideas to lead us to, one, a better life, and by living a better life, to Him. So with that being said, I believe that you don't believe it in a literal sense. It's not going to do you any good. And to that, I had a science teacher at Macaulay, very devout Christian woman. She sat and said, never consider the Bible a science book. And remember, I should tell you, she had a PhD in biology. She said, a science book changes every few years. The Bible doesn't change. That doesn't mean the Bible's wrong. It means the science adapts. To view the Bible as a science book does it injustice. It's not meant to be hard facts. It's not meant to be a history book. It's not meant to be taken in the most literal sense possible. And the way I know that is look at societies. With us viewing the Bible as a book of guidance, we look at it, we ask it a question. For example, let's pick an issue, and we can use the Bible as
Abortion.
Abortion, that's a very hard one.
That's a hard one.
What does the Bible say on it? People like to poke fun at the book of Acts and saying the test of a bad marriage is justification of abortion. It's not. It's about how to identify an unfaithful wife. The Bible likes...
Let's go back and say it again. Acts.
So there's a chapter in Acts, and it's the test of an unfaithful wife that abortionists always like to point at. And I'd have to pull it up if I wanted to get very accurate with you.
We're doing generals.
Yes. But they sit and say, it sits here and says, because the priest says, may this child be damned and never born if she was unfaithful to you, if she has been adulterous, that Christianity supports abortion. That's not what that says. It sits and says, if she has been a bad wife, if she has been unfaithful to you, may she have bad things happen to her. It is guidance. It's the idea that if she has done this bad, evil thing, we don't wish good upon her. Childbirth is the best thing ever. It's a miracle. Dee, you have 2 kids yourself. You know that it is a miracle. The fact that 2 people can get together and make a child, and that child come from 2 people is a beautiful, miraculous thing.
It almost proves there's a God.
Almost, yes. And my favorite quote, So most people don't know this. Do you know who came up with the Big Bang Theory?
A Christian.
Yes, not just a Christian. He was a Vatican priest.
That's right.
He was the head of the Department of Astronomy at the Vatican. He came up with the Big Bang Theory saying, there has to be a God, because how else could something so beautiful have been made in such a way? It makes sense. There's a pattern. I can follow it. I can see how the stars move. I can see where stars have been born and where stars have died. God has clearly done this. And if you add, he was a Harvard professor, I'm forgetting his name, but he was the foremost expert of microbiology. He says, science and the tip of science will make you an atheist. But when you reach the bottom of the glass, you will find God. And his research and in his belief, he said, by seeing the world in the microorganisms that I have seen and seeing atoms and microparticles, it is like viewing other universes. And obviously, a divine being had to have set it in motion. So, back to the idea of what does the Bible guide us on abortion? It says to value life. Life is God's greatest gift. Without it, we cannot cherish God. And that is our foremost. The mantra of Macaulay is honestly a very good saying for life. It is to cherish God, or hang on. Man's chief end is to glorify God and cherish Him forever. That is if you look at the Macaulay seal, that is what it says. And in that, it is right. It's to cherish the works of God. We live in a beautiful world. In this ring, there are atoms that I will never see. And above us, there are planets that I will never visit. But I cherish their existence by being able to at least know they exist. And I glorify God in the fact that I am able to be alive, to give Him the glory of understanding it. So in that, life is a beautiful thing, because in it we're able to give glory to God. But more importantly, we're able to be ourselves. God created us in His own image for the sake of us being ourselves. God's not lonely. God's infinite. Why did He create man? It is for man to enjoy being man. That's
not to be ruled by this book and find things we've done wrong.
But in that, not to be heathens. That's a very big thing. Is if you look at the Old Testament, most people forget about the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. 3 of those books are laws. There are 316 Judaic laws. We don't follow most of them. Dee, is your shirt made out of anything? Is it one solid fabric? Is it just polyester? Is it just, if it's mixed fabric, that's a sin. Well, does that make sense?
We probably both had ham for lunch.
That's right.
That would have been a sin, right?
If we've ever ate shellfish, it's a sin.
Yeah.
If we've ever sat down on the same seat as a woman who is menstruated,
that's a
we
sin.
have sinned.
Yeah.
The issue is,
but smoking wouldn't be, and taking drugs wouldn't be a sin, according.
if
we took it
in
literal.
some cases,
Yeah.
or killing someone because they are a criminal is completely justifiable. But I'm not to commit murder. There's very fine lines, and the Bible defines those. It's to give us a guidance. And most of those laws, we have to consider, would God give us the ability and know-how to make fabrics that are multi-fabric? Is it heresy and blasphemy to say that it's out of God's plan to teach us how to view the world?
I always think to myself, okay, if it's wrong, why is it wrong? And if there's not really I can see why it's wrong, then it probably wasn't in the literal sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, and
like the one fabric thing.
Yes.
What would be wrong with wearing a double knit?
and if you look in like the Midrash, the Jewish rabbi's explanation, it is to certain fabrics are reserved for certain events. Sackcloth being reserved for mourning and so forth. But in society, our way of portraying mourning has evolved. So is it truly against the will of God if we as a society no longer wear sackcloth to a funeral? Would God have allowed that? These are questions we have to ask. And the biggest counter-argument to this is, would God allow atrocities? And the answer is,
They're in the Bible, aren't they?
they are. If we're to believe, even in the most literal sense, if the Bible is true, if it is literally a history book, if everything about everything else is wrong, we know for a fact God is a vengeful God. He says so himself. But in that, are atrocities in and of themselves pure evil, or can we learn from them? The answer is both. Think of, for example, the Holocaust. From the Holocaust, we have seen pure evil. We as the world have sworn to prevent that evil from ever occurring again. But it had to have happened for us to sit and say, never again. For us to form the World Coalition, the United Nations, to sit and say, genocide is abhorrent, we will never stand for it, and this is how we will deal with it. Have we been effective in that? No. But we've made the first step.
Moving in that direction.
Exactly. And so, God gives us, I believe, in his infinite plan.
Well, the Bible can't cover everything that's happened anyway. I mean,
No. And
it doesn't even mention abortion. We're arguing about abortion, and the word abortion is, I guess it's not even in the Bible, right?
no. The closest thing is miscarriage.
Do we have freedom of religion in America?
As Christians, no. I believe in America, our freedom of religion has been greatly abridged. It's been hurt. Think, when you were in school, did you read the Bible in school?
Yeah, we had prayer in school.
That's right.
Now you can't have it, right?
You see, I have peers that I had the great privilege of going to private schools that instilled in us Christianity and religion, and that encouraged us to explore beyond our own religion to make sure that we believe in the right one for us. Now, with that being said, I was given the freedom to do so. My peers who graduated from public schools are not given that equal liberty. And to the point that I'm making is, they're not given it because they don't teach the Quran. They don't teach the Torah. They don't teach Maitreya
the Gita.
Buddhism. Yeah, the Bhagavad Gitas.
Yeah.
They don't teach the teachings of, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and Rajneeshism. Like, insert religion. We can't teach them all, or else they'd be in school till they're 50.
60.
Yeah. And the issue is, that was the first step, taking the Bible out of school. Think back to COVID. I could go to a cannabis shop in California to buy my weed for anxiety. I could go protest if I wanted, but I would be arrested if I went to church. And the issue is, we have given little and little and little. It's everyone. My favorite thing ever is every time someone sits and says, "Oh, you're just claiming it's a slippery slope argument. You have no proof." I can sit and say, "Well, yes, but I've watched it slide so many times with so many other things. Why would I trust you now? Why would I trust that you're going to be honest now?"
It's almost like the animal.
Yeah, the story of the scorpion and the frog.
No, the animal. That book, Animal. Not Animal Kingdom, but where all the farm animals got together and
Fight. Yes, farm. Animal Farm. By
Animal
George
Farm.
Orwell.
Yeah, Animal Farm.
In some ways it is. And eventually people will have enough, just like the animals on the farm. But in today's society, I don't believe religious freedom actually exists. It exists as far as you're allowed to practice it by yourself.
As long as you're pretty well close to the narrative.
Yeah, and as long as you don't go outside the box.
That's right.
And that's...
If you do, it's not freedom of religion.
And for example, there have been so many things that have abridged the freedom of religion. Think of how many times we've heard in the last 2 years, no, you have to take the vaccine. We don't care what your religion says.
Yeah.
No, you can't keep your kids away from sexual education. It is school mandated. We will fail them if you don't.
And it started by saying you have to wear a seatbelt. I guess, right? Was that the first rule?
There are a lot of first rules. And I think for freedom of religion and for them trampling the freedom of religion, it was taking the Bible out of classrooms. The argument that the ACLU had made back then and other major groups was, if we can't do it for everyone, we can't do it for one. Well, the issue with that being is, now because we can't do it for the one, we can't do it for the any. And the issue is, it's not an equal enforced rule. Because in schools, how many times do we hear about them, like a social studies class, teaching about, for example, Ramadan, a very beautiful holiday in the faith of Islam. But they can't teach about, for example, Easter and the true meaning of Easter. They can talk about the story of Hanukkah and what it means to Jewish culture, but they can't talk about what Passover means for Christians. They can talk about Passover for Jews, but not for Christians. Or they can talk about, what is it, Bali, the celebration of light for Indians, with Hinduism. They can talk about it, but they can't talk about, other aspects of Christianity. Because then it's cultural explanations instead of religious teaching. And it's a double standard, and it's a dangerous double standard.
It really is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If you want residential or commercial plumbing, give Rick's Plumbing a call, Coach Jason or Josh. They'll do you a good job. I've used them for years. They're no problem.
Come on, woo!
Has it ever been this bad? It hadn't been like that. They say that most societies that crumble or whatever, that what happened prior to that was they didn't distinguish between the men and women. Have you ever read that?
I can definitely see a pattern with that. I haven't read too much on it, especially in Roman society. If you look at Rome had a very staunch hierarchy of who were the upper echelon based on gender. So it actually very crude in nature, but it's how the Romans differentiated. So those who were penetrated are at the lowest. So in Roman society, at the very least, women who had no capability of penetrating were always lowest. Men who were penetrated were above women, simply for the fact they had the capability. Men who penetrated just women were the next highest, and men who penetrated everything, for the sake of dominance, were at the highest of the hierarchy. And I quote Mary Beard on that with the book SPQR, great book for anyone out there. In that, when Rome started to encourage debauchery, when it encouraged hedonistic practice in a manner that was no longer reflective of the actual practice of the Hellenistic faith, or I guess it's for Rome, it was the pantheonic instead of Hellenistic, it devalued their society so much that it led to the entire overthrow of their society when Emperor Constantine Augustus said, I'm done with this, I implement Christianity as the dominant rule. And if anyone opposes me, they will be killed. And but before that, we had seen Rome from the time of Julius Caesar to Caligula. And everyone knows about Caligula being crazy and depraved, to Julius Caesar saying, I must take over Rome for the sake of the preservation of Rome. It's a slippery slope. But I do believe that gender roles, in some sense, are essential to the betterment of society. I'm not saying women stay at the house. I'm not saying men have to work.
No.
But I'm saying we have roles. And if you don't differentiate, men are inherently physically stronger. I know that's controversial to say nowadays. It is a fact. There's a reason why the United States Navy has never had a single female Navy SEAL. It's because none of them have been able to pass the physical endurance requirements. It's a fact. There's a reason why Leah Thomas, the transgender swimmer, was not in the top 10 swimmers as a man, but is the top swimmer in the United States as a woman. It's the different physical attributes. So, do I encourage men to work harder, more physically labor-intensive jobs? Yes, because they're more suited for it.
Right. That goes to Jordan Peterson's thinking, right?
Yes, that masculinity is required for a society. If we devalue masculinity, we devalue society. If we say that there's no difference between men and women, it's all in our heads, and that women can be construction workers just as well as men, there are some women, I will admit, that very well could swing a hammer just as well as a man. But proportionately, there are 10 other men who can do the job better. That's just a fact. It's not sexist. I'm not saying that she's outwitted. I'm not saying that she's less valuable in society.
And men can't sew as good as a woman.
Potentially.
Or whatever.
And, I know plenty of women who are much smarter than me, especially in terms of mathematics, because my brain doesn't inherently pick the pattern as quick. Women are brilliant in their own special and unique ways. And when we devalue women in that way, I think that's more sexist than sitting there saying there is no difference.
That's right.
For us to say there is no difference is more sexist because it devalues the woman as a woman.
That's right.
And we're seeing that whole ideology implode in on itself, especially on the issue of transgenderism and especially abortion. Every feminist will say that a transgender is a woman until it comes to abortion. Then only people with wombs can tell you who can have an abortion. So apparently they all turn into biologists at that point. And
now they're all war experts.
Yeah,
in Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. And the point is that we can't sit there and say we have one standard except for this example and every other time. Either you have a standard or you don't. And when you don't, it hurts everything. And that's why we as a society have, one of my really good friends tried to phone in.
Oh.
He wanted to give us input. He would actually have a lot to say on this. He'd be
Now
a
they're
good one.
sitting live, you know that.
No, I know,
Yeah,
I'm just teasing. But in that, we need standards.
But isn't it good to be able to have these talks and discussions? And this is the way that people in societies grow, not by keeping it held down, right?
Exactly. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Why do we give them the same amount of respect when they won't even discuss their idea with us? If I sit and say that I don't believe that so-and-so is this and that because of this, and it offends someone, and they just sit and call me a insert IST or, insert slur, or I'm stupid and you have no education, and enlighten yourself, broaden your horizon. These are the things they throw at us. But when you actually ask the questions, they don't answer.
But right now it feels like they've got the whistle.
They do. And that's what people are waking up to is, why do they?
Why is the referee on their side?
And if they can't defend their ideas, in the age of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the great enlightened thinkers, we can even go to the Enlightenment period with Rousseau, Descartes, Hobbes, Locke, all these brilliant philosophers. if you presented an idea in their era and didn't answer questions about it, you would have been laughed out of the forum. They would have said...
At a minimum.
At a minimum, yes. And you would never be invited back.
Yeah.
They would say, he's obviously an idiot, he cannot defend his ideas, thus his ideas are bad. It literally goes to a Socratic method. Socrates sat and said, if it's not logical, if it cannot follow a pattern of ideas and thought and logic, it is obviously bad. If it cannot withstand question and answer. Think of your class.
Do you follow along with that thinking?
Do I believe that asking questions is essential?
No, I mean that if it doesn't follow a certain logic.
I believe that it must be willing to withstand at least questioning. I'm willing to accept non-logical answers if they are able to withstand the logical questions.
Yeah.
And if not believe them, I will at least respect them more because they're prepared to have the discussion. You know, they sit and say that when you earn your highest degree, it's a PhD, in any field, that is when you are declared an expert. You've done the research. You're brilliant in whatever you study.
That defined area.
Yes. 3 people at a minimum are sitting at a table as you present your idea, and their whole point is to challenge your dissertation. They try and poke holes in it. They try and ask questions. They try and make you answer what you published. And in today's society, people aren't answering to what they put out there. We have crazy ideas.
They'd be
that are just-
offended nowadays, wouldn't they? He asked me a question.
Exactly.
I don't like the way you
And,
ask it.
you know, I have to sit and wonder how many times at a dissertation challenging, people have had to hesitate to ask a question because of who's on the other side. If it perhaps is, you know, as I always like to say, intersectionalism is a very dangerous idea. When we give more credence and weight, and it's also, I'll get to this point in a minute, it's also a very prejudiced idea. But the idea that a transgender, handicapped Muslim woman who speaks Spanish and is an immigrant should have more of a say in our society because of the experiences that person may have than a straight white man. Well, that's absurd to me.
It's absurd.
And more importantly, especially in the standard of double standards, it's racist. It is honestly, think of affirmative action. In and of itself is a racist principle, not because it discriminates against certain people and encourages other people upwards, but it sits and says that these people on their own merit are incapable of reaching this level. Mm-hmm. That's racist, and liberalism in and of itself has created a monster. And if you sit and listen to their arguments, like how many times have you heard in the last few years, well, we shouldn't encourage voter ID because minorities will be incapable of getting a photo ID.
Yeah.
Well, are you telling me that people who have to get a driver's license to drive, apply for a job, go to the liquor store, buy a pack of cigarettes, you know, insert whatever freedom you may incur from having a photo ID.
They can buy a gun.
Yeah. Are incapable and so unintelligent or incapable of actual action on basis of their race alone to go get an ID to vote? I'm calling BS, and I'm saying that your idea is, one, racist in the fact that it holds them in such low standard. And two, it inherently hurts our society because it uses a fascist tactic. It says, challenge me, and you are wrong, you're evil, and I will punish you. And I think that's unacceptable.
Do you think our society will rise up as a group and say, hey, now, wait a minute?
I sincerely hope, and as we previously discussed, I'm hoping the silent majority finally stands up.
If you're looking real close, you can start to see some trends.
Yes.
I think.
Absolutely. I think 2022 will show that America is finally waking up. That we as a society are tired of being told that we are evil, that we're bad, and we are bigots for just asking questions or having common sense.
And I think all of this happened while we were working.
Yeah, that's a very good
and
point.
we weren't paying attention. Does that make sense?
It does. People who have a lot of extra time create some really bad ideas. That As what's the old saying, Dee? Idle hands make for the devil's work.
Idle hands are a devil's workshop.
That's it.
Something like that.
That's it. And in that, these people honestly are creating such a dangerous environment politically. They always say that most leftist ideas cannot survive in a free marketplace of ideas because people will never pick them. Why do you think every time a socialist dictatorship appears, the first thing they do is take away the guns, take control of the media, and sit and kill anyone who challenges? It's because they understand that if given the opportunity, people will never pick it. In America, they're trying to use that same tactic, if you question it, you're evil, you're bad, we'll punish you. They're using that today against us because our idea exists in a much better way in the market. How do I know that? It's because it's the Great American Experiment. There's a reason why the Great American Experiment predated and also post-dated the Soviet Union. It's very simple. We lasted longer, we existed before, and will exist far after because we are a free marketplace of ideas.
And we don't have our troops strung all over the Ukraine.
Yeah. At least that we know of.
That we know of. Hey,
Dee,
I've enjoyed it.
it's been a pleasure.
I've enjoyed it. Come.